Welcome back to Psychiatry, Rewritten. My name is Lane. This episode is for the people who feel low even when nothing's wrong. For the ones who keep going, keep doing, keep trying, but never quite feel like themselves. If that's you, you're not alone, and you're not making it up. So let's start here. Not with sadness, not with hopelessness, but with something quieter and harder to explain. That strange, heavy nothingness. Like joy got turned down. Like you're walking through life slightly muted, slightly off. You're not miserable. You're just not really there. Maybe you've said it before. Or maybe you've only thought it. I'm not even that sad. I just don't feel anything. And the thing is, you're still functioning. You're still getting up, going to work, answering text, handling what needs to get handled. But underneath all that, there's this dull, quiet emptiness. Like a fog that never really clears. Like you're watching your life instead of living it. Especially persistent depressive disorder, also called dysthymia. It doesn't always knock you over. It just stays, lingering, low grade, long term. You can live with it for years without even realizing it has a name. Because when you're still showing up, when you're still doing the things, people assume you're fine. Sometimes you assume you're fine. You start telling yourself things like, maybe this is just who I am. Maybe I'm not meant to feel happy. But let me say this. That's not your personality. That's a pattern. That's a mood state. That's a nervous system that's been on low power mode for so long, it forgot how to light up. And maybe no one's ever asked you the right questions. Maybe you spent years thinking that if you're not suicidal or sobbing or completely falling apart, then it doesn't count. But here's the truth. Depression doesn't always look like a crisis. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like indifference. Sometimes it looks like a person who laughs at the right time, says, "I'm good," and then goes home and sits in complete stillness, wondering why nothing really moves them anymore. If that's you, if you've felt that low-grade fog or that deep emotional flatness, I need you to know you're not lazy, you're not broken, and you're not imagining it. This is real, and it deserves to be taken seriously even if you're still high functioning, even if no one else ever noticed, even if you've gotten used to calling it your normal. You deserve more than muted. You deserve presence. You deserve joy that feels real, not fake, not forced, not fleeting. And if you haven't felt that in a long time, this might be why. Let's talk about something that really messes with our heads, especially when we're already feeling low. The idea that happiness is the goal. We hear it everywhere. Choose joy. Happiness is a choice. Positive vibes only. And if you're not happy, well, you must be doing something wrong. But let's pause on that. Because here's the truth that most people never say out loud. Happiness isn't a lifestyle. It's a moment. It's fleeting by design. It shows up, it lifts you for a little while, and then, just like every other emotion, it passes. That doesn't mean something's wrong. That means you're human. We've been sold this story that we're supposed to feel good all the time. That if our life is in order, if we have the job, the relationship, the roof over our head, we should feel happy. But for some of us, that's not how it works. Sometimes the environment is fine. Nothing dramatic is happening. And we still feel low. Still feel flat. Still feel like something's missing. And that disconnect between what we think we're supposed to feel and what we actually feel, that's where the shame creeps in. We start asking ourselves, why can't I just be happy? What's wrong with me? Why isn't this enough? But maybe it's not about enough. Maybe your brain is tired. Maybe your nervous system is dysregulated. And maybe your mood has been hijacked by patterns that you didn't create and you can't control with a Pinterest quote and a gratitude list. This doesn't mean gratitude is useless. This also doesn't mean happiness isn't real. But it does mean we need to stop treating happiness like the default setting, because it's not. And the more we try to force it, the more we try to shame ourselves into feeling better, the more disconnected we become from what we actually need. Sometimes it's not about feeling happy. Sometimes it's about feeling safe. Sometimes it's about feeling understood. Sometimes it's about feeling real again. So if you've ever looked around at your life and thought, this should be enough, why do I still feel so empty? You're not alone. You're just a human in a world that's been lying to you about what happiness really is. You're not broken. There's something we don't talk about enough in mental health. And that's the people who live in the middle zone. Not stable, not in crisis, just constantly shifting. They're not fine, but they're not bad enough to raise alarms either. They just keep riding it out alone. One week they're okay, energized, social, productive, even a little hyped up. The next week, they're withdrawn, numb, maybe anxious, maybe crashing out a little. Then they come back up again, but not in a chaotic way, just a little too much. A little too impulsive, a little too intense, a little too everything. That's when people start calling them moody or dramatic or too sensitive or a lot. And what they're actually dealing with might be cyclothymia. Now, if you haven't heard of it, you're not alone. It's one of the most underdiagnosed and misunderstood mood disorders out there. Cyclothymia is like bipolar disorder's quieter cousin. It doesn't usually come with full manic or major depressive episodes, but the mood swings are real, and they still affect your relationships, your energy, your confidence, your decisions. What makes it hard to catch is that the high periods can feel like you at your best. You're on fire, you're confident, you're finally getting stuff done. But maybe you're sleeping less, talking faster, spending more, taking risks without thinking. Then a few days or weeks later, you're low again, and you don't know why. And because you're still functioning, because you're still doing life, no one really asks what's going on. But you know, you feel the shift. You see it. You start realizing that your whole life is this loop. A little better, a little worse. A little better, a little worse. And no one else is keeping track but you. And the wild part? You probably doubt yourself for even noticing it. Because you've been told it's just stress, or hormones, or burnout, or overthinking. But here's the truth. Mood instability, even when it's subtle, matters. It's not just a personality quirk. It's not just being emotional. it can be a sign of something real going on neurologically, something that deserves support, not dismissal. If you've ever felt like you're constantly swinging between almost okay and almost not, and no one's ever taken it seriously, this might be why. Cyclothymia doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just whispers. A little too much energy, a little too much irritability, a little too much shame afterward. And that middle ground, it deserves to be seen. Because living in the almost zone, almost stable, almost fine, almost sinking is exhausting. And it's real. I kept thinking happiness would arrive eventually. That if I just did all the things right, healed enough, slept enough, worked hard enough, it would finally show up. I'd finally feel like myself. But it never did. Or at least, not in the way everyone else seemed to describe it. There were moments, sure. A funny conversation, a song I forgot I loved. But they were flashes, like light through a crack. And then it was gone again. And I was back to that feeling. Not sad, not broken, just muted. I used to wonder if maybe I was just ungrateful. Like maybe the problem was me not trying hard enough, not being positive enough. Because technically, everything was okay. There wasn't a crisis. There wasn't a reason. And that made it worse. Because how do you explain to someone that your life looks fine, but inside you feel like you're stuck behind glass and you can't say anything? Because the second you try to open up, people remind you how lucky you are. They say, but things are going well. Other people have it worse. You don't really have anything to be sad about. So you stop talking about it. You start smiling harder. You laugh louder. You pretend better. Because if everyone expects you to be okay, then admitting you're not, it feels like a failure, like shame, like weakness. So you keep masking. Not because you're trying to lie, but because the truth feels too inconvenient to say out loud. Sometimes I'd have these days where I felt amazing, motivated, clear, funny even. I'd clean the whole apartment, text everyone back, feel electric. And then I'd crash hard. And no one ever noticed because I always showed backup. I started tracking it on my phone. I'd look at the highs and the lows and think, is this normal? Is this just life? Or is this something else? I didn't know what to call it, so I called it me. And I hated that version of me. The one who smiled at work and cried on the drive home. The one who could function and still feel empty. The one who kept waiting for happiness like it was a train that was just running late. It took years before anyone asked the right questions. Not just, are you depressed? But, has this been going on for a long time? Do your moods shift even if you're still functioning? Does it feel like your joy never fully shows up? And when they said the word dysthymia, I cried. Not because it hurt, but because for the first time, someone saw it. Not sadness, not crisis, just the quiet ache of something that never healed. Because no one ever named it. And now I could finally start learning how to live with it, instead of pretending it wasn't real. And for others, it doesn't feel flat. It feels unstable. Like the floor keeps shifting beneath them. This is that story. There were weeks when I felt incredible. I'd wake up before my alarm, rearrange the living room, blast music, and make 5 new plans before noon. Ideas came fast. Words came faster. I'd feel clear, sharp, me, but better. And I'd think, finally, this is who I really am. Then, I'd crash. Not dramatic, not suicidal, just empty. Like all the lights went out. I'd cancel the plans, forget the ideas, and sit in this fog, wondering how I could feel so alive yesterday and so flat today. No one ever noticed because I still showed up. I still answered emails, still laughed at jokes, still looked fine. But inside, I felt like I was constantly trying to catch up to myself or slow myself down. Never just steady. Never just balanced or predictable. I used to think maybe I was just moody or sensitive or hormonal or too much. And I hated that word, too much. But sometimes it was true. I could talk too fast, feel too strongly, spend too impulsively, say things I didn't mean and regret them days later, then go silent, isolate, overthink everything. And no one ever connected the dots because I wasn't manic. I wasn't hospitalized. I wasn't in crisis. I was just inconsistent. Too high to be depressed, too low to be fine, a little too much, then not enough. Again and again. I remember Googling bipolar disorder and closing the tab before I finished reading because I didn't see myself there. It felt too extreme, too far from my own experience. But what I was going through still didn't feel right. It wasn't until someone said the word cyclothymia that I stopped second guessing myself, because finally, someone named the in-between. The highs that weren't highs, the lows that weren't lows, the shifts that no one saw but me. It wasn't just moodiness. It wasn't a flaw. It was a pattern. Now that I can name it, I don't have to fight it the same way anymore. It's still hard sometimes, but at least now I know it's real and I'm not alone. Let's talk about dopamine. Not in a pop psych, hack your brain kind of way, but in a real, grounded way. Because for a lot of people who feel low, numb, or unstable, it's not always about emotion. Sometimes it's chemistry. And sometimes dopamine lies. It promises relief. It promises energy. It promises connection, reward, escape. And then it leaves you flat again, more drained than before. Maybe you felt this. You scroll for hours, you binge watch something you barely care about, you order food, get the delivery, eat it, and feel nothing. Or maybe worse, you feel disgusted by how much you were hoping it would help. And it's not just you. This is what happens when our dopamine system is overstimulated and underregulated. When we live in a world that bombards us with quick hits, but offers almost no real satisfaction, we chase highs, digital, emotional, sensory, and then we crash into lows that feel hollow. For some people, that crash looks like burnout. For others, it looks like emotional numbness. And for others still, especially those with ADHD, bipolar traits, or trauma histories, it can feel like a constant back and forth between craving stimulation and shutting down completely. That's what I mean when I say dopamine lies. It doesn't tell you what you need. It tells you what you think will feel better for 5 minutes. And if you don't know that's what's happening, you start blaming yourself. You call yourself lazy or unmotivated or broken. But maybe it's not that. Maybe it's a brain trying to regulate in a world that keeps pulling it out of rhythm. And here's the thing. Sometimes depression isn't sadness. Sometimes it's dopamine debt. Your system is depleted. You're exhausted from chasing the spark and the things that used to light you up don't anymore. Not because you don't care, but because your brain literally doesn't have the fuel. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, trying to fix their feelings with willpower, when what they actually need is repair, nervous system repair, dopamine recalibration, routine, sleep, protein, movement, time, things that don't give a rush but build a baseline. So if you've been trying to snap out of it and nothing's working, please hear this. You're not lazy. You're not broken or beyond repair. You might just be out of balance. And healing from that isn't instant, but it's absolutely possible. Let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. Atypical depression. And honestly, the name itself is misleading because it's not rare. It's not strange. It's just not typical in the way textbooks describe depression. Here's what it can actually look like. You can feel joy, but it doesn't last. You do have emotions. They just swing harder than you expected. You might sleep too much, not too little. Eat more, not less. Be more reactive than withdrawn. And feel deeply sensitive to rejection or criticism, even the small stuff. And because it doesn't look like classic depression, a lot of people, including clinicians, don't recognize it for what it is. They see energy and assume you're fine. They hear a laugh and miss the crash that comes after. They notice that you show up and never think to ask, what it cost you to keep doing that. That's why so many people with atypical depression mask, especially if they've been masking for years because of ADHD, autism, trauma, cultural pressure, or just survival. And let me say this clearly. Masking doesn't mean you're dishonest. Masking means you're exhausted. It means you've learned, whether consciously or not, that your pain has to be packaged in a way that's palatable. So you water it down, you shrink it, you filter it. Because when you tried to say something before, you were told it wasn't that bad. That you should be grateful that other people have it worse. So you stop saying anything. And that's where atypical depression lives. In that space between what you feel and what you're allowed to express. Some days you can get things done. Other days, your body feels like it's filled with sand. Your brain wants connection, but your nervous system says, nope. You want to feel better, but every effort feels like dragging yourself through glue. And what makes it worse? Most people have no idea you're struggling because you're still funny, still responsive, still helpful, still performing. And that performance, it hides a lot. It hides the emotional whiplash, the rejection spirals, the internal scream of someone trying so hard to hold it together when they're barely hanging on. Atypical depression is real. It's valid. And it deserves treatment, not dismissal. Because you're not weak for not bouncing back. You're not dramatic for feeling things deeply. And you're not lazy for being tired all the time when your brain is running a full marathon just trying to look okay. You've masked so well for so long that even you might have forgotten what it feels like to just be. But you're still in there, beneath the mask, beneath the crash, beneath the expectations. And you don't have to keep doing this alone. So here's the part no one tells you when you're stuck in that space. When you feel numb or off or like something's always missing, the answer isn't always be happy. Because honestly, that's not always possible. And trying to force it can sometimes make things worse. So what if the goal isn't happy? What if the goal is something else entirely? Something deeper, something steadier, something that doesn't vanish when your dopamine dips or your mood shifts or life feels heavier than usual? What if the goal is meaning? Happiness comes and goes. It's momentary. It's chemical. It's fleeting, even when it's real. But meaning stays. It's the reason you get up, even when you're tired. It's the thing that gives your pain context. It's the thread that connects you to something bigger than whatever you're going through. And people who feel stuck, people who feel numb or unstable or chronically muted, they don't always need joy. They need connection. They need language. They need a way to feel real again. I've seen this over and over. The moment someone finally feels understood, their whole system shifts. Their shoulders drop. Their eyes open. It's like they've been holding their breath for years and they didn't even realize it. Sometimes feeling better doesn't come from a breakthrough. It comes from finally being seen, for someone saying, hey, I think what you're feeling makes sense. So if you've been chasing happiness and wondering why it keeps slipping through your hands, maybe you're not chasing the wrong thing. Maybe you're just using the wrong word. Because you don't need to feel happy every day. You just need to feel human. You need to feel like your life matters, even when it's hard. And you need to know that how you feel, even when it's quiet or messy or not that bad, is still real. You are not making it up. You are not alone. And you are not too late to name what's been going on and start making peace with it. Not for perfection. Not for constant joy. But for truth. And maybe, just maybe, for relief.